Okay, well, it's 12:30, so let's get started. So welcome everyone, welcome to the Peace Studies Conference and to the panel, Reimagining Justice in Theory and Practice. I'm Joséphine Lechartre, I'm a PhD candidate here at the University of Notre Dame, and it's my pleasure to introduce three great papers that hopefully will get us thinking about justice and the practice of justice and the theory of justice and its relation to peace building. So we have today three papers. The first paper is going to be introduced by Zerihun Kinate from the University of Waterloo. Then we'll have Sophia Maya Collin from the Santa Barbara and Ventura Colleges of Law. And then we'll have Hudi Alassane from the Miller Institute of Interdisciplinary and Development Studies. So the way we'll proceed is that I will give each panelist 15 minutes to present their work. I will send you a message in the chat when you have 5 minutes left and then 1 minute left so that you can conclude. And then at the end of each of the three presentations, I will provide some remarks and then open up for Q&As. So if we don't have anything else, then Zerihun, the floor is yours and you have 15 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Josephine. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. Here is in the Waterloo in Canada. It's afternoon. So, my name is Zerihun Kinate, and I'm a graduate student in Peace and Conflict Studies at the University of Waterloo. So, today I'm going to present about today I'm going to present about the Abba Geda in Ethiopia. It's a traditional indigenous peace building institution. The Abba Gedas are very much unique to the Ethiopian society in the Oromo and the Gedeo. In Ethiopia, we have more than 86 ethnic groups and tribes. So the Gadaa is particularly practiced in the Oromo, one of the largest ethnic groups, and the Gedeo in other ethnic groups. So the background here is, conventional. The justice system, usually we assume the laws and the institutions. The court is usually delivering peace and justice, but indigenous, wisdom, it dictates that peace is not always about the courts and the laws. It has to be also the traditional practices and everyday experiences of the common man, the ordinary citizens and people. So. And the indigenous international institutions also have been in practice for the last, thousands of years before the introduction of laws, the introduction of the courts, and before the coming emergence of the states. So they are the one which has been, preserving the states, the status quo, the peace and the stability of the society. So. Catherine Barnes, I think in her Waving the Wave civil society roles, working with peace building, she says that peace is about creating their own system of working through their differences. So, as Paul Lederach, states, peace is about it's a constructed reality of that society. So when we assume peace in the Gadaa society, in the Oromo community or the Gedeo people, or in the larger African community or any indigenous society, it is about the locally constructed reality of the meaning and understanding of peace. So we have to know and try to live that reality of those people, how they define and how they conceptualize and practice peace. So even the complexity theory also exemplifies this, stating that complexity is in every culture, in every society. So assuming that modernity is, or modern societies are only complex, have their own way of thinking and practice and making justice and peace is very erroneous and wrong. So every culture and every tradition has its own complexity, its own dynamics and way of doing things. So justice and peace is one of that elements of, how they try to live and experience life. So in the African ethos of indigenous restorative justice, there is harmony between the individual and the community. The individual is part of the community, but at the same time, there is no tension between the individual and the community, because the, the whole is larger than the sum of its parts. So the whole is conceived as being, in a very stable tranquility of, managing obligations and responsibilities and duties. So there is no tension in managing those differences. And also in the theory, as Zahar also stresses very, eloquently, there is restorative justice, or the conventional law. Usually, it establishes justice and brings us peace, but there is punishment, and there is also creating resentment of that one is winning, the other is losing. So there is a winner and loser sense of peace and justice in the modern legal parlance. But the restorative justice system, the African context, assumes that justice is through reconciliation, through maintaining and restoring relationships. So it is not that, exercising power. It's not also, punishing the offender. And also another very clear definition of justice is it understands offense from the point of the society, not from the two parties of the offender and the victim. The offense is made against the society. So the society takes that offense committed against the society, the social fabric, the social values and practices. So the society, through its traditional institutions, and in this case, traditional elders and leaders, tries to correct that wrongdoing. So that person has the chance and the possibility to recorrect, to adjust those mistakes and wrongdoing. So there is a possibility for learning and a possibility for also making mistakes. So that's how it allocates responsibilities and duties. The ideal type of justice and peace, with which we assume the conventional or Western liberal peace building approach, is it has great qualities of defining human rights, rights of women and other rights, very much important in intersectionality issues. But at the same time, also it misses, the very complexity of each and every society. So we need to be very, and highly nuanced and careful approaching how we approach every society. So every society has its own self-organizing principles and institutions. So, and the peace building should also be, our role should be in a facilitating those, platforms, those creating those enabling environments. So in the case of even Ubuntu, which is a very famous practice in Africa, especially in South Africa, which the term comes from, the Zulu, is the ability to unite and reconcile the self with the community. So the self is defined within the community, within the society. There is no self outside of that society. So there is no tension or tyranny of the society on the individual. There is no individual liberty at the expense of the community or the society. So there is equilibrium and balance between the individual and the society. So when it comes to Abba Geda, they are the wise cultural leaders in the Oromo and Gedeo people. So it's a traditional way of leadership in the ethnic groups of Gadaa, Gedeo and Oromo. So the system is a social organization based on age grade. So usually there are 8 years assuming political power. So there is a democratic way of holding office and also handing that office to the next generation of leaders. So the problem with this leadership style is women are not that much stronger representation, or they don't enjoy much leadership role in this the Gadaa system. And the Gadaa system organizes the social life based on obligations and responsibilities of those leaders. It also considers its own, rules and regulations, which needs to be, applied by all members of the society. So it categorizes the people into a ready-made pattern of positions and tasks with the clear responsibilities, and also with the chance and the possibility for upward mobility. When men entered the Gadaa system, or they call it Lupa, at the age of 40, they became ready to administer society, and they're responsible to celebration of rituals and ceremonies. the authority held by the elders is derived from their position in the Gadaa system. So the Gadaa, the institution, the set of practice, empowers them to do what they are entitled according to the Gadaa system. So they are very much respected, even more than the justice system, the legal institutions, more than the states or the courts, even the police. So how they define peace and justice is somehow, I think, a fascinating thing, which the first one is justice is seen as in a very an ecosystem of trust and trust. So that means it also combines the environments. I mean, the cattle, the climate change issues of water, river, and the farming, women, children, and the economic system. So it tries to integrate all this environment, the natural way of living, the traditional way of living, in a keeping the balance and the striking balance among those groups of the society. So an individual is making offense not only on the community but also on the environments, on the cattle and the illegal way of farming or taking someone's property. There are issues of conflicts in grazing lands and farming plot of lands. So usually they are resolved through the Gadaa institution and through the Gadaa leaders. This has resulted in significant. Another area is usually women in the Oromo and Gedeo ethnic groups. They have been subject to some abduction, forced marriage, and unequal and without their consent, women even at below the age of 5, they are subject to marry other older people. But with the introduction of more empowerment of the Gadaa system and more awareness is being created that women should be protected, body harm should be avoided, and their human rights should be respected. So the Gadaa institution is now democratizing itself with the 21st century of norms and laws. So they are becoming very much instrumental and crucial in the changing of the narrative, at the same time in empowering women to play a very critical and strong role. So even though women are not in the highest leadership office, but they also have some leadership role playing in the Gadaa system. But with the introduction of modern education and with awareness, they are becoming a very irreplaceable and a very crucial part of the justice system. But with this introduction, there are also some concerns. Some local leaders and politicians is trying to co-opt and trying to politically influence the decisions of the Gadaa leaders, and this is wrong. And as I argue, this is very wrong, and it is also affecting the legitimacy of the Gadaa institution, because the Gadaa is assumed to be they are expected to be legitimate, accepted by whole of the society, irrespective of the ethnic group, irrespective of the gender and the economic, social, and religious status. So they need this empowerment and enhancing of the role of Gadaa should be within a very careful and a very sensitivity of understanding the dynamics and the different political and power interests within the society. And so it's not usually the case in traditional peace building. One of the challenges, as I said, is the women issue. That is, I think, continually could be resolved through more introduction of education and more peace building role should be given to the the Gadaa. Finally, maybe clear example of peace building has been is International Migration Organization have been conducting some real practices of implementation of peace building. In 2018, there were ethnic conflicts and the tribal conflicts, and 800,000 people were displaced. And one of the conflicts is on the grazing land and farmlands. So the Gaddas were used because of they have a very strong social capital. They're very influential in the social environment of the society. So they were used to mediate and to bring reconciliation among the different ethnic groups and the leaders. So they bridged the social capital among the divided ethnic groups and tribes. And the good thing about the Gadaa is whether the Muslims, the Christians, the pagans, or traditional believers, they all listen to them. So they are uniting across those divides, across those intersectionalities of ethnicity and religion. So that's the very strings of the Gaddas. And There are, as I said, there are some wrong attempts by the states and the local leaders, which are, which needs to be very careful. And finally, there needs to be also a clear policy how to approach within the legal system, within the whole policy of the African countries, and also as a Western liberal policy, implementers and peace builders, we need to also be careful how we try to work with the local restorative justice institutions of indigenous institutions like Gadaa. And so when we talk about, for example, the role of women is not that much significant, we have to be also at the same time careful, because we need to see the internal dynamics and define how we can empower women within the existing status quo of that society. So generally, this is all my presentation, and I hope if I have questions, maybe we'll discuss later. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you very much for respecting also the time. So now we're going to listen to Sophia's presentation. Sophia, the floor is yours, and same, I will send a message when you have 5 and 1 minute left. You're muted, Sophia.
Thank you so much. You see it all right?
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean,
excellent.
I'm not seeing your PowerPoint right now, but
Okay. Is this better?
yes.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much. I would just like to thank the Kroc Institute and Notre Dame University for so generously including me in your discussion of peace and justice. I am profoundly grateful to be a part of this conference and to stand in the light of your exceptional speakers. I'd also like to extend another thank you. This presentation, although discussing law and crime as a whole in abstract terms, will also address practical, real-world applications where the words we enshrine as law manifest as action or inaction in our daily lives. We will be discussing the police. I understand this is an extremely complex subject, and in many lives, a deeply painful realm of our justice system, which, when discussed, requires the utmost respect, patience, and understanding as a community. It is my wholehearted intention to discuss this subject with as much grace and love as possible. I implore the audience to also remain open-hearted, as audience members' experience with the police or as police officers themselves are diverse. And I thank you for being here with me today to approach this important and difficult subject. We are all pillars in the house of justice. Our beliefs and experiences are the true strength of our common house. The goal of this discussion is to cultivate peace through a greater expression of justice. It is my hope to build bridges and help others do the same. The presentation will roughly fall into 3 parts. 1, the philosophical background. 2, the need for symmetry in law. And 3, practical applications of unbounded law. As we reach a new section, I will provide a more detailed outline of each section. Ideally, I would be able to pause after each section and take questions or clarify things, but I'm going to have to go straight through because of the 15-minute limit, and I look forward to hearing your questions and having further discussions about the overview at our discussion at the end of our presentations. Philosophical background. Let us consider action charitably, with a mind to how virtue plays an inextricably vital role in justice and in human flourishing. And there will be 2 overarching philosophical concepts. The first that we'll discuss is aesthetic ethics in 4 parts. The second, the virtue heuristic, which I will address one facet of. Philosophical background, aesthetic ethics, the gaze. It is important to view action and people as works of art, with care and open-mindedness, as if viewing the creation of beauty in a museum. Aesthetic appreciation cultivates peace by cultivating an environment of meaning and understanding. Approaching a person or event as beautiful, like a work of art, allows for one to not immediately jump to a preconceived notion or conclusion, but rather seek meaning, context, and correlation in a thing otherwise obscure or made invisible by a person's preconceived notions. Second, the method. The how of an action is just as important as the what of an action. What the action achieves, that is the form of an action, or how an action or goal is achieved, is just as important as what is achieved. The overall form of action contributes to the overall morality or success or content of that action. Take, for instance, an individual who graduates from a difficult educational program. But let's say that person did it by cheating. Or let's take an example of someone who is very wealthy but benefited from forced labor. The achievements are negated by the way they were achieved. The how of how one gets to a certain place is just as important as what is achieved. Second, the whole. An aesthetic is a positive evaluation and harmony of attributes that seek to cultivate peace, which can be directly applied in designing policy. An action achieves an ethic if it achieves a harmony with the whole of a societal aesthetic. The mirror. What one sees in art and ultimately in another person is partly oneself and our own experiences. When we see ourselves in the mirror, we can better negotiate our interactions in a more meaningful and peaceful way. The virtue heuristic. The virtue heuristic posits that harmful action is a result of virtue in conflict. That is, that harmful action is a product of an agent's desire to do the right thing, and when caught between two virtues, ultimately do the wrong thing by being unable to uphold all virtues in a given situation. By viewing harmful action as ultimately the product of virtue in conflict, we are able to find that in every harmful action is actually a good action, and that ultimately no action can be entirely bad, or that any person is ultimately bad for their action. Now, we shall discuss the need for symmetry in law. The first category is bounded law, which is the law that we have currently in our society, which prohibits action. It prevents citizens from doing bad deeds. And law is a weapon to discourage citizens from committing harmful deeds by punishing those who commit them. It demarcates right and wrong in a bounded concept. If you go over the bound, then you transgress, you receive a harmful consequence. And it's reactive as it anticipates an action and goes into effect as soon as a transgression has occurred. And then I will propose unbounded law as a symmetrical addition to our bounded law system, which encourages action. It helps citizens to aspire to good deeds. Law is an instrument of peace, not retribution. It celebrates and acknowledges good deeds. Law that cultivates morality, and it does not embody morality itself. In addition, it's action because it's operative before harm occurs. It's justice that is working to create and promote prosperity, and it's operative after in resolution of harmful action by exploring the virtue heuristic. Bounded law. The concept of bound, to set boundaries, to limit, to confine with the bounds, to mark the boundaries of. To limit itself, be limited, to form the boundary. This is a language that keeps in and keeps out and clearly delineates right action from wrong action. What is bounded law? It prohibits, it prevents citizens from doing bad deeds. Governments have been and currently are structured, but what I call the bounded law that restricts people physically and intellectually. It's restrictive physically because it instructs people what actions they cannot enact, such as do not speed, do not commit assault, do not enter others' property without permission, etc. Bounded law is physically restrictive as punishments are tangible consequences to bounded law, such as imprisonment, fines, and the death penalty. Bounded law is also intellectually restrictive because it points to the failings of societies, not their triumphs. Moreover, bounded law emphasizes what cannot be done instead of inspiring and empowering its people to what can be done. It has a negative anticipation. A bounded law only system is not a laissez-faire morality, allowing for the maximum freedoms of its people by addressing only basic societal protections. It is clandestine oppression. In many ways, it's hypocritical by preventing violence with violence itself. Only recognizing bounded law prevents individuals from evaluating for themselves what is or not good and forces the individual to see the world in the black and white of crime and punishment. Punishment does not have a brain. It is a harmful consequence that does not change the hearts and minds. It does not necessarily improve lives. Law becomes vacuously moral as obedience does not signify a deep understanding of an action's merit as such in the world, but only one steeped in fear, threatened by the ossuature of violence inescapable in law. The central relationship government has with its people is one of castigation. Bounded law expects of its citizens an absence of action. In this way, it wishes for its citizens to be invisible. It is organized to rule by the threat and implementation of exclusion, punishment, and over time produces the discord that is now present in society: fear, animosity, and division. Those who do not obey these bounded mandates separate themselves from the public by dissent. In addition, bounded law may single out groups for specific regulation, and over time, divided peoples make society ripe for fragmentation, discord, and overall lacking in prosperity. What is essential to the role of government is cultivating and celebrating peace. When the authoritarian eye is directed towards the gutter, it does not gaze into the public sunlight. Bounded law blocks out the light with its own edifice. Suffering and transgression resonate within the bounds of our common house. It becomes haunted by the echoes of its operative features, fear and punishment, and its harmful aberrations caused by bounded law. That is, if we think of our justice system as a house in which we live in, and the walls are the bounds which are protected and enforced by punishment, what kind of fear is that create in your common house? What kind of echoes do you hear and live within when your house is engaged in a bounded law system where negative consequence is how you engage with your government? And now I would like to move on to unbounded law. In 1970, Joni Mitchell sent a telegram to California from Europe with a message to her lover, Graham Nash. If you hold sand too tightly in your hand, it will run through your fingers. A restricted, bounded system cannot contain all things. The need for balance in the legal system can be compared to the classroom, where if you anticipate your professor to only chastise you, only correct you, and not encourage and promote your learning and acknowledge your positive contributions in the classroom, that you will develop a relationship of fear or resentment towards that authoritarian figure. And that as a class or as a community, we need to acknowledge each other, not only when we do something wrong or we need support in another area to grow, but also when we achieve something that positively impacts us as a community. Moreover, peace is a presence and not an absence. Government that enforces only by bounded law expects absence as a form of peace. But peace is a presence. It has its own body that must be encouraged, promoted, tended to, and that is exactly what unbounded law seeks to do. The definition: law which seeks to promote and recognize good action within a community. action which benefits either an individual or the community as a whole. Justice is more than acknowledging the failures of citizens, but also acknowledging their successes. It is through the acknowledgement of virtue that this law seeks to promote and maintain positive action and resolve harm. It is within a person that true government exists. The internal government is essential to the external one. We are all pillars in the house of justice, and our actions either support or disadvantage the structure. There would be no house without meritorious action that hold it up. The roof is in service to the pillars, and the pillars in service to the roof. And without the whole of its parts, the whole is forsaken. And if we take aesthetic ethics and directly place it into the context of unbounded law, the gaze, law needs to see people as beautiful, not just potential lawbreakers, but as people who positively contribute to society. The method, law has to take into consideration how it goes into effect and how it encourages or discourages behavior. It can't just punish people, it must also acknowledge people positively for how they contribute in a good way. The whole, how the law creates a resonant harmony. How is this law going to be when we live inside of it? What kind of resonance will it create for us as a people in our common house? And how law will reflect in the mirror, how law will reflect the agent and the agent's engagement with their community. You have to know how you as a person can see yourself in this law and how the individual can engage with the community in a harmonious way. In the virtue heuristic, law which assists citizens in avoiding the disjunctive virtue scenarios. So you have to figure out as a government, how am I going to make law that helps people achieve what accomplishing as many virtues as possible and not being put into that disjunctive virtue situation where you have to choose one or the other and then a harm occurs as a result. In addition, law which takes virtue into account once it has occurred, so a post-harm scenario where we're able to look at an individual as a whole and find out what happened, what virtues were operative that led to the harm, and how can we learn from that? What meaningful takeaway can we have in the resolution process by examining the virtue heuristic? Moreover, special attention can be given to when virtues are in conflict and that one could have been preserved, but were not. In that scenario, why did someone choose not to embody all virtues? They could have, but they did not. Two, when does a person choose an individual-centric virtue over a community-oriented one that causes a harm? Now I'm going to get to the practical application, the Peace Pin project. Okay. The Peace Pin is, I'm wearing one now. It is a bridge that police will be able to give to citizens in order to acknowledge positive action. They need to be able to acknowledge each other when we positively contribute to society and not just negatively do so. Police enforce law by punishment. However, a relationship founded on punishment incites fear and resentment. Enforcing a bounded law-only system is psychologically detrimental to police officers and to citizens. And three, the growing tension increasingly marginalizes police and citizens, further worsening community relationships. Without symmetrical law, as described in classroom politics scenario, and the embrace of the virtue as essential to law and to human flourishing, there is a breakdown of the system. You may see today, if you are attending in person at Notre Dame, that I have some pins available for you to take a look at. You can see here's the back of the card and here's the front of the card. And I have been working with police departments to be able to give out these pins when they acknowledge good in their community, in order to not only engage with the community in a negative way, but also in a positive way. And I hope to further discuss this with you in our breakout sessions together and answer any questions that you may have. It has been an absolute pleasure presenting, and I look forward to further exploring these topics with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for this great presentation. Great. So last but not least, we're going to switch to Hudi Alassane presentation as well. And same format, I will message you when you have 5 minutes and 1 minute left. So Hudi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much. And thank you very much, other panelists. My name is Alassane Hudi. A hybrid justice system harmonizing indigenous contemporary conflict resolution mechanism in Ghana. My presentation is taking this outline. I will first of all provide an introduction and the problem statement upon which this research bounds, and also look at the methodology used in the research paper, and so move on to look at the major findings and the recommendations for this study. This is just a depiction of the indigenous versus the modern justice system in Ghana. On the left is the palace of the Wana, the overlord of the Wa traditional area, the Wa kingdom, and also the other side is the building of the justice, the Supreme Court of the Republic of Ghana.
We are not seeing your presentation anymore.
Yeah. Yes. You see my screen?
Yes. Yes, I'm seeing your emails now. Yeah, it's working.
Okay. So in terms of the introduction, over the years, indigenous conflict resolution mechanisms are abound in Africa, demonstrating resilience as conflict resolution and peace building fora for many community members in Africa. These indigenous mechanisms and other traditional or customary systems play a very crucial role in terms of, and also for rural communities, justice within their communities, including women and children, contextually structured and rooted in cultures and also in traditions that respect the values of the system that the people over the years. In recent years, the utility of these system remain very challenging in contemporary African societies. These mechanisms are either not being recognized by municipal laws or have minimal operation within these contemporary societies. The relationship of these systems to municipal fair trial system and rule of law are actually being substandard and also not in existence, particularly in criminal justice. Human rights, including particular those of women and children, are also precluded within these indigenous justice systems, particularly when you look at the section 1 of the Ghana Alternative Dispute Resolution Mechanism at 2010, and in relation to the Supreme Court ruling on AFCON's Infrastructure Limited versus Chiron, Vekes Construction Limited, these issues about some level of criminal justice administration are precluded from this indigenous system and alternative justice mechanism. conflict, which span over since the 1933 through to 1979, through to 1985, up to 1998 and 2000. Indigenous conflict. At a point in this conflict, the Supreme Court has passed a judgment for one particular dispute. And in this case, but enforcement become challenging because there's no with the war, chieftaincy crisis, purposively chiefs, elders, opinion leaders, disputants, and victims, as well as lawyers and judges, and justice administration interviewed. A total of 150 respondents were interviewed, and focusing on it was also using structured interview and focus group discussions to the structure of the apex court, followed by the Court of Appeal. The High Court has various divisions: the Fast Track High Court Division, the Commercial Division, the Land Division, the Human Rights Division, also the Labor Division, and then the Financial Crime Division. And then at the lower court are the Circuit Court and also the District Courts. But when you come to chieftaincy issues also as well, the National House of Chiefs and the Regional House of Chiefs also have justice systems within them that operate. In terms of the modern justice delivery system, after the findings actually shows that about 30.2% of respondents believe that judges in formal court systems have little or no just understanding of chieftaincy matters or chieftaincy issues, and they may be truths beyond evidence. So the justice delivery system, the contemporary system, focuses more on evidence-based, but the belief of many of the people interviewed actually indicated that they can be the truth beyond evidence. Also, a proportion of 23% of respondents believe that the former court system favors unscrupulous tactics. It can take a longer time for cases to make it through the formal system, and it becomes very adversarial. As well as 15% of respondents also believe that chieftaincy issues are deeply rooted in traditions and culture, and as such should not be determined by contemporary court system. About 18.2% of respondents firmly believe that contemporary courts are very slow in delivery of justice, and also finally 13.6% of respondents attribute costs as a very disincentive to contemporary justice system mechanism. But in terms of leveraging on culture and tradition, one key thing that came out strongly is the legacy concept of the wireless. The legacy concept basically is the role the historical antecedents and clan lineage provide strong basis for conflict resolution, which need to be harnessed and actually being advanced. In terms of another concept that came out very strongly is the Tijabuyan concept. The Tijabuyan concept is an effective use of community leadership and conventional system of community justice and moral appeal that brings about unity, that brings about justice, and that brings about comfort in terms of disputant in agreeing on the delivery in terms of justice. There's also a strong mechanical solidarity among the people, and this mechanical solidarity is linked up, is a strong social capital, and that strong social capital binds the people together, and it binds the people in a way that's building peace and resolution has people to have a great potential in terms of resolving conflict among the people. In terms of recommendations, the provide central role for chiefs and community elders in conflict resolution decisions on the parties that are disputant. The court should be allow for the use of indigenous mechanism to resolve conflict, to deal with the cost access to justice. We need to also reimagine an infusion of indigenous in contemporary system and provide a solution. The picture on the right shows the water tradition and there's a cheaper is resolved and solution. Imagining the role of the religious leaders in justice delivery system is also very fundamental and key, because in terms of our are Muslims and 71.3% of them are Christians. There are so many.
It looks like we are having connections problems. Let's just wait a couple minutes to see if Hudi is able to connect again. Right,
Yes,
Hudi?
I have a in my.
We're not hearing you well.
I'm just concluding.
Are you hearing us? Okay. Well, let's see if Hudi is able to join us again. What we can do so that we still have some time for Q&As is that I could make some remarks on Zerihun and Sophia's presentations first, and then if Hudi comes back, he can try to finish what he was telling us. Does that sound good? Okay. Well, thank you to you both for your very interesting papers and presentation. I think they are both dealing with very important and timely topics. So for Zerihun, I think it's a very important paper because it's dealing with questions of everyday practices of peace, and also proposes ways to integrate indigenous practices to traditional justice systems, showing the shortcomings of conventional justice systems. And I think something that is really important is also to integrate those concepts of healing, harmony, to discussions of justice, which is something that is also present in Sophia's presentation. I think Sophia's discussion is also particularly important and timely when we're talking about questions of policing. And I think there is a need to go back to more positive thinking of justice. So I thought it was really important to have this discussion about not only the punishment nature of justice, but also the way that justice can be a positive force for change and for peace. Hudi, I see that you're back with us. Would you like to finish your presentation? I think.
Yes, I would like to just conclude.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, I would like to just conclude by saying that reimagining the role of religious leaders in justice delivery system is very important. There are so much revered and respected. The National of Peace and Religion and Religious Integration in Ghana, to the picture on the National Imam with Christian bodies together and having good interaction. It also provides interface with Quran and Bible verses on peace and justice, because the Holy Quran and then the Holy Bible are read by followers of both Muslims and Christianity. So these books are, when you use the verses of these things to promote peace, then it becomes much more stronger. Support religious leaders to use their sermons and sessions to drive justice, and also recognition of traditional and religious leaders in the justice system and justice administration in Ghana is very fundamental. Thank you so much. And this is the end of it. And then the references to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Hodi. I'm so sorry we had connection problems, but hopefully, I think I got most of it. So I just gave some remarks on the two other papers. So I'm going to also make some comments on yours, and then we can open up for Q&As. So thanks for this great presentation. I think something that is really useful in your paper, in your presentation, is the concrete recommendations that you're giving. I think it's really important to have concrete avenues to integrate indigenous conflict resolution practices to more conventional justice systems. I think very often we're talking about integrating local practices without necessarily being very precise about the way things work. And I think both in your paper and in Zerihun's paper as well, the importance of finding mechanisms that cut across cleavages in society is also something that is particularly important to foster peace building. So this is a particularly important topic, especially when we're talking about more participatory institutions. So thank you very much. We are going to open for Q&As from the audience. And depending on how many questions, we can collect a few, and then the panelists will have an opportunity to respond. So the floor is yours for Q&As. So we already have one question from Moses. So I believe it's addressed to maybe both Zerihun and Hodi. He's asking, what does recognition of religious leaders in justice administration mean in practical terms? So maybe you can answer, since we don't have other questions so far.
Hodi, do you want to go first?
Okay. Very much. The recognition of religious leaders in justice administration systems, religion play a very critical role in the context of indigenous communities, and religion has been a rallying point. It has been a rallying point for community members and groups. And when you are able to effectively get the religious leaders so much involved in the administration of justice, in the administration of peace building and conflict resolution, very much stronger and well accepted by all. When you look at Ghana's election over the period, religious leaders. These religious leaders, because of the revered positions they have, when political parties are at the heart of themselves and are at each other's throat, religious leaders come in to quell down these tensions. They are able to use their pulpit to communicate peace, to integration, and to advance unity among the people. And this has over the years been a rally dispensation, particularly successive during election period, when tensions are high, when people are at each other's throat, politicians are divided, and the country is almost at collapse. So religious leaders and traditional leaders become a very strong rallying point to bring the nation together, to bring the people together, and then to push for justice and to bring all of them and provide very simple justice administration, very simple conflict resolution mechanisms without going through an adversarial system of contemporary justice. Evidence is the bottom. There can't be the truth without evidence. There can be the truth. There are processes to arrive to justice and truth without necessarily producing the burden of proof or burden of evidence and doing are focused on.
Okay. I think in my presentation, mostly I didn't highlight, I have not highlighted actually the religion or the faith part of the significance of faith, but in my paper, it's very much significant because I think one thing is very much essential in African context or in indigenous justice tradition, specifically speaking. That is, religion is defined not only from the Christian or Islam or those the dominant religious denominations and belief systems, but also it is from those beliefs which are traditional, which has been practiced for long years of millenniums of years, like the traditional belief systems. So the Gadaa system, one quality of it is it's recognized and it has actually lived with the traditional belief system, which the Oromo and the Gedeo people usually have been practicing. So even the faith practice is very much environmentally friendly, which is taking care of the environment, the lakes, the rivers, and how the farming system should take place, how shouldn't harm the environment, the mother earth. So this an ecosystem of living in harmony. So harmony is the very essential word. And another word, as I used before, is reconciliation. So we are not talking about conflict resolution. We are not talking about managing conflict. We are talking about in a sustainable fashion of reconciliation and building and restoring relationships. So it is a peace building approach, and it is also justice in a way of life. So the difference with the conventional justice system is justice is not just served with monitoring and evaluation procedure. That's usually the challenge for the indigenous practice of justice. It is an everyday practice and a daily way of life. So, even some authors, normally try to undermine the significance of everyday peace, but it is a very essential in the indigenous communities because that maintains the self-regulation, the self-adjusting of the different power dynamics, different interests, and it also changes. And another, I think, caveat you have to mention is there is always change. So the changes may not seem to be significant for outside observers, but there are always changes, progress towards an incremental, transplantation of different formal, liberal, human rights and humanitarian laws. But at the same time, without, causing any disturbance, any damage to the existing status quo and institutions, there have to be, there has to be a process and a mechanism to integrate and to enhance those the effectiveness and efficiency of those justice systems. So in the liberal traditional one, usually the phase is being seen as nowadays there is an interest to integrate faith and religion and spiritual values, but that's also one element of the trauma and healing. But in the indigenous and traditional peace building, religion is always part of life. Spiritual reality is part of the everyday reality. So there is no usually separate discussion because it is also part of the practice, part of the understanding. So there is no tension, and there is no also any misalignment how the religion is part of. And another maybe is religion is indigenous peace building mechanisms are transboundary of they transcend ethnicity, they transcend religion, they transcend other differences within the community. But sometimes some indigenous practices are practiced in some localities and some ethnic groups, and other indigenous practices could be practiced in a national broader among different ethnic groups. So when usually the most important thing, especially to resolve national political issues, which need national restorative justice, the transitional justice issues, I think one important caveat is to bring all different indigenous practices within kind of having national assembly is my recommendation, because only promoting only few voices, few indigenous practices might cause a challenge again at the same time in the undermining of or silencing other indigenous practices, which are also at the same time important. So there should be a national policy, to give agency and a voice and a representation to most of the indigenous practices. Otherwise, in African context, I know in Canada, and when you say indigenous, it's about the indigenous community. But when you say indigenous in African sense, it is a very diverse and very complex practice, because there are thousands and if not hundreds of ethnic groups. So we have to take also that consideration into our understanding. So phase is very important and should be taken into consideration. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much to both of you. So we have another question from Diane for Sophia, asking if she could elaborate a bit more on the PIN project and how it is implemented.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. The Peace PIN project is a project in which police are able to acknowledge good acts in the community by giving a pin to those they see doing something positive in their community in order to create a more create symmetry to their job and also facilitate symmetrical justice, which ultimately will cultivate greater trust between community members and police by alleviating the officer and the community members from solely engaging in negative situations. And I've spoken with police about this project, and we're very close to piloting it. Certain scenarios in the community that police have seen that they feel they could have done something, and they wish they could have done something, but didn't have an avenue or a method in order to engage with the population in that positive way, would be an officer saw people step up and assist in the pushing of a vehicle that had stalled out of the way. Another officer said that he had seen an individual in a wheelchair get stuck in a crack in the sidewalk and saw a complete stranger come up and lift the wheelchair out so that that individual could be on their way. And these officers have indicated to me that they wish they could have done something. They wish they could have positively acknowledged, but didn't feel like they could. And I think that it would have been very nice if they had, and that I think the community would appreciate that positive interaction. And I believe the Peace Pin would be a bridge to acknowledging positive action. And also community members can give pins to police that they see doing positive things out of their own way for the community members. And in this way, we can see each other in a new light.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to take advantage of my role as a moderator here to ask Sophia a follow-up question on this. So I was wondering, so this PIN project introduced symmetry by defining what is good, but I was wondering to what extent defining good behavior is also contributing to policing of behavior. And so if we're really dealing with the concept of good, who is establishing this concept of good? Who decides what is a good action that should be rewarded versus an action that is not necessarily rewarded? And how does that contribute to also, policing behavior in the public space?
That is an excellent question. Thank you very much. I hope to achieve, first off, a democratic process of acknowledging what is good by allowing community members to do that themselves in their own community, and that the police and community members are responsible for seeing each other. There is a very holistic, community-oriented process. And at present, I don't foresee a overarching authoritarian figure that says, no, that was the wrong thing to acknowledge good, or something along those lines. Is that an answer? Or perhaps you'd like to clarification?
Yeah, no, it does. And I think something that also you said previously is that community members can also give pins to police officers, which is
Absolutely
great. I think having a relationship that goes both ways is actually already a way to remedy that potential problem, I guess. So we have another question in the chat by Moses, who's saying indigenous justice mechanisms are often highly skewed gender-wise. Images of these systems are predominantly dominated by men. does this undermine access to justice by gender minorities? In reimagining justice processes, how can this be remedied? So I think Zerihun was addressing this explicitly in his presentation.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, Justin, I want to come in.
So sorry. Hodi, let me answer this question and maybe. Shall I go?
Just a bit of just a bit of addition to say that yes, indeed, have been male dominated, but they have a very strong female backing. They have a very strong female undertones which build the foundation for these systems. So in most of the traditional seen, the kingmakers, particularly in some areas of Ghana, are women who are the foundation upon who the king is chosen. So within the traditional setup, there are women who play active role in who become a king, and each of the traditional institutions are having a queen mother, and particularly in the white traditional area where this study focus on is having what we call the Pornaba. The Pornaba is in the same palace with the chief, and the Pornaba is the opposite of the chief. So is the queen of the land, and that Pornaba have a very instrumental role in what happened in the palace. So in most of the justice system, justice administration processes that are involved in it, you see the as part of this process. And beyond that, we also have at the church level and also at the mosque level, we have of women within. For example, when you come to the Muslims, we have the Women Federation, Muslim Women Federation, and then we have, and all of these are an embodiment of strong pillars within these religious that preach peace and that are able to rally around the men in process of justice delivery system.
Thank you.
Right.
Zerihun, if you wanted to add something.
All right. Yeah, I'm saying because I usually think the picture was I used this on main because it's the Gadaa system is essentially male system. I mean, I have to admit that, but also that doesn't mean, as I think Hori said, there are roles for women. They are in the leadership, even if it is in the lower rank of the leadership. They have also key roles they play, especially in the local, everyday life and different dynamics. They are very much critical players, active in allocating different resources and also managing different tasks in the village and the community, life. But I think, understand how we understand gender is very much a complex process, and also, as I said in my presentation, there is a move to enhance, empower women, and especially now, which is important is is respecting the human rights, the fundamental human rights of women, and especially against harm, bodily harm, and the sense of consent at the same time also. Consent has never been practiced. So now there is a concept of consent that she has to say yes to marry someone. She has to say yes to engage in a sexual intercourse. So she has to say yes for other harmful practices of circumcision or genital mutilation and kind of practices, which now have become they are legally punished nowadays because the state system has a backward law. But usually implementing those laws are also challenging because unless we make these traditional institutions of the Gadaa as a key player, actors in this kind of processes, it is usually challenging because they have to believe that this is inhuman. This is not, it shouldn't be done without the consent. Even with consent, shouldn't be done. So this kind of practice now gaining momentum, and there is more awareness. There are now female leaders nowadays, having the vocal role and playing very strong role. And they have even civil society, local civil society groups, organizations they established running this to increase the awareness and fight this kind of practices. And at the same time, also, I think, as Hidru said, we don't have to also make the, I think some outside observation is we usually assume women do not play a strong role in Africa or other indigenous communities. That's also wrong. And in my research and reading, I found that sometimes how the authors, historians give voices for some, warlords, warriors, men is usually problematic because the role of women has not been, represented and presented very well. That doesn't mean that they are absent. That doesn't mean that they were non-existent or passive. They were very active. They are still active, and they are very dominant players. And not only in the war, in the warriorship or in the fights with the enemy or other, conflict situations, but at the same time, in a peace building situations, in economic areas, in development endeavors, environmental protection, and also, in creating a very, meaningful citizens of people. The young children and men and women grow, seeing their mothers and female leaders as role models. So we grow up with that kind of environment. So that kind of moral nurturing of good citizenship, good people is also the very essential part of indigenous. Usually we don't give it that much of voice and attention. I think one problem is we, as using our Western, and the liberal telescope and lens, we usually tries to see things from that outsider observation. But if you see it from the insider perspective, there are encouraging voices, encouraging engagements, and also leadership from women. But we need to also try to give them voices and platform, how they can be, so that it can be disseminated, it can be replicated, it can be enhanced, and could be a dominant. It is not a dominant voice because of that. So we have to make it a dominant narrative if it is really to gain some sense of presence and to have some transformational change. So there is a change. Sometimes the change might seem slow, not as much as we assume as an educated or as a peace builder. We assume it should be having some transformation, and but there is a change. So that change also needs to be supported. We have to facilitate that dialogue, that conversations. So we have to also be at the same time, I think, patient somehow, because when we try to see the ambitious goals and visions that we try to achieve, sometimes you may also cause some irreparable damage. Some so those balancing strike is very important.
Thank you. Well, maybe just one concluding question, and then we'll be at time. I had another question for Sophia about, so the Peacebuilding project is in this setting directed at the police. Are there any other spaces where you would see unbounded law to be working? And maybe what would that would look like?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It's a wonderful question. I think there is a tremendous amount of work that can be done in the area to further investigate its applications. At present, there is one other project. It's a proposed 20th Amendment to the US Constitution, which makes love an inalienable right, and encouraging that everyone embrace their truth and their love, and that would be a way to cultivate peace. That would be another application, is to create rights that embody what a country believes in, and that it fosters the soul of its people to prosper as their own true selves in their own light. That would be another application.
Great, thank you so much. Well, we're at time, so I'm going to conclude. Thank you very much to our three panelists. I think these were fantastic presentations. Again, very important topics, and hopefully this is food for thought for the audience. I encourage you to reach out to the panelists with further questions and to engage in conversations about these very important topics, because we obviously could not cover everything, and I have so many more questions for all three of you. So thank you very much for attending. Thank you again for presenting your work. And yeah, let's conclude this amazing session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm honored to present and see you. Thank you. Have a good night.